Hey everyone. So, today's video is going to be something a little bit special, which is basically me telling the story of how I started maining Oberon and related stories to that. Before I start though, I do want to mention that in my previous video, I did say that I had this commentary pre-recorded, and then I would like basically just upload it whenever. But I decided to redo it for a number of reasons. But anyway, onto the Oberon story. So surprisingly, this like the time when I started the time when I started maining Oberon most likely started on July 7th, 2016. And I was actually convinced that it instead started mid-2015. But, whenever I checked like a bunch of things to try and confirm, that's the date that it really strongly led to. Before then, I did use Oberon for a short time period, and I ended up selling him. So while I did misremember that time frame, the whole 2-year main appearance swap thing most likely still applies. Even if not, I'm not gonna get hung up about that. What this means though is all the things I'm gonna tell you from the regular Oberon time period happened over the course of less than a year. And by the way, you'll probably see like my new Oberon fashion stuff in my next video, whatever that happens to be. I haven't planned that video out, but you can be pretty sure that it's going to be at least somewhat focused on that. So anyway, so this time period was a time when I realized that I understood the game more than most other players. Now, of course, I still had a lot to learn, but other people's judgments just weren't good to work with, because it was oftentimes easy for me to find something that worked better than what they said. This is where I decided that I needed to give everything a fair chance if it clearly wasn't a poor choice. So for example, I wouldn't have tried Exani, but I would have ended up trying stuff like Bolto and Jawsword. The big difference is Exani, it doesn't have anything like really special about it. And, it's clearly like lowish DPS, or at least it was. I'm not sure about now, but it was, clearly pretty bad at damaging back then. Well, Bolto and Jawsword were also like clearly bad at DPS, but then they had their syndicate mods, which weren't really that great, but like still it was something worth considering. So that's pretty much what I mean. So anyway, it's also worth mentioning that at this time I was in Rockmo Vance's clan. You might know him. He's a YouTuber. And I was a pretty big fan of his God Build series. And that's actually sort of what the name of my first Oberon loadout, Fairy God, comes from. So yeah, I tried Oberon eventually, and I think what appeals me most was how well balanced he is. This is in the sense that he could handle not just any mission, but any task needed within that mission. So for example, if someone needed healing and defense, or crowd control and interceptions, I could do that. So the main shortcoming that I noticed is that while he was well suited for public lobbies where he can easily adapt to any preferable form of cooperation, pre-planned lobbies almost never suited him enough to be an optimal choice. So he was only really good when I didn't know who my teammates would be, which was the usual case. Because I didn't have many friends at the time, and they were mostly casual too, so they'd like swap frames just for fun and stuff like that. I didn't really care about skill or anything either. I even did an MR test for one of them in share play, which was kind of cool, I guess. It was the one where you have to like kill the enemies on the platforms that are like on the like dissolving platforms. They dissolve as you stand on them. Yeah, I did that MR test for a friend. Still, that was my perspective. I don't know if I would still think the same today, if the game was still the way it was then. But yeah, that's basically that. I got a lot of mixed general responses. There weren't really any weird trends besides how much people took notice that I was using Oberon and decided to say something about it. And that was especially true in sorties and endless missions. Uh, like, uh, I was an endurance runner back then because, like, I think I actually got into endurance running because, that's how a lot of people wanted me to, like, prove stuff, basically. Which is how I, eventually got to doing, like, 90-minute mod with Oberon and stuff like that. Anyway. Um, so yeah. I do have a lot of individual notable cases to talk about, though. So, for example, I was in Hiracon one time, and someone was telling me that my ability wasn't working. And I tried to explain what it did, and he was just saying that it wasn't good and that I wasn't helping. And then the mission ended with me dealing the most damage. And I know Hiracon isn't all about damage, but damage there is important. And I did that with an ability that also crowd controls, uh, which is arguably the most important thing on Hiracon. Which, by the way, is excavation if you're not familiar with mission names. Like, it's specific excavation node. Um, so yeah, I think he was pretty dumb for that. Uh, that's the most minor example I can currently remember, though. And I don't know if the other ones are worse, but they're definitely a lot more memorable, and I definitely took them as worse at the time. There was even one that actually started in Team Annihilation. This was back when AoE weapons in Conclave dealt damage based on proximity to the user. And I was, of course, using Ogress. So there was one player on my team who decided to relay a message about my Ogress use from their friend on the other team. The part that I remember the most was some PMs from one of them, which led to a comment about my 51% Oberon use. And that's actually the story that I think about the most, and I don't exactly know why. And that was the first time I talked to said person, so I had like no prior friendship or anything. I later encountered her in some mission, and she asked something. I can't remember what it was, but I told her that I remember what she said that day, and just refused to give her whatever it was she wanted. It was probably something pretty minor, but I still thought it was just best to refuse, basically. Just because of that. Uh, I saw her in chats a few other times, and like I was even tempted to like message her or something, but like it wouldn't have done any good. Even like I'm recording this on the 17th, so like exactly a week ago I saw her in trade chat. Same temptation to like say something like I don't even know what exactly I'd say. It's probably how you know it's like just a bad idea. Uh, so yeah, like it was really upsetting for a while, but uh, yeah, shouldn't really matter too much, right? Anyway, there was another time I ended up joining a server, which ended up being my favorite for a while. And one of the staff there, pretty soon after I joined, was actually telling me that I was crazy for thinking Oberon was good. And I partially convinced him otherwise over time, although I can't remember if he more so acknowledged Oberon's capabilities or just my skill with using him. I played with talked with him a lot since we ended up in the same friend group, mostly from that server. And there was even another person in that group which more so criticized my min-maxing abilities. When I really got into doing like calculations and stuff, it would even insult the fact that I put so much mathematical effort into the game. Uh, oh yeah. in other Discord server, there were actually multiple people who were about as avid about min-maxing as I was. They didn't have like the same need to constantly maximize their gameplay efficiency as like I generally do though. But you know, there were a lot of like opinion clashes about what's best, and like sometimes what could be settled out objectively, people just like didn't want to bother because like I think it was partially because like I was pretty much like the guy that thought that Oberon was good, and it's like so it's like, you know, some of these things are like really upsetting in that way, like they just wouldn't even like try to reason just because like probably because like they thought it was such a ridiculous idea, or like that like my reasoning would be ridiculous or something. uh you know, I don't know exactly, like I wish I knew, but I really don't, so that's about all I can really say. There are plenty more stories like that, but uh I can't like remember them all in full, and uh it's not all like bad stories either. Like there were some good ones. Like, you know, I met plenty of Oberon mains who were like really cool, and they're like, and you know, pretty much wowed by the fact that, you know, I could use one frame so much, or like just people in general who were like wowed by that fact. Because like as much as I've searched, I've actually never been able to find someone who's used Oberon or like any frame as much as I have. There was even one time where I was like wanting to offer a bunch of platinum to someone who actually used Oberon more than me. It was just basically like a fun idea to try and see if there was anybody like that. So like if there was someone like that, they would probably hear about it, and then, you know, they would come for that platinum, and then I would actually be aware of the fact that they existed basically. But yeah, even like after that, I never found such a person. So, and I'm talking about like specifically with Oberon. If I had to guess, there are probably other people who've used like just their chosen frames like as much as I've used Oberon, but you know, in terms of like searching specifically for people who've used Oberon that much, I never found anyone. Uh, so yeah, eventually came the time when Oberon was both getting reworked and having his prime released. I was actually really excited for this time, but I ended up really unhappy about it. And it's not just because like the Oberon changes, like, or rather, not just because like he got buffed. Like I did dislike a lot of the changes, but it's a lot of things around the same time period. Stuff like Super Vandal and Prisma Angstrom released. So and at the time, those were my two favorite weapons. So like two favorite weapons got upgraded, along with my favorite frame getting like significantly upgraded. And so things got a whole lot less interesting for me. Like, it's not that I didn't want Oberon changed either. I had many ideas for ways to make Oberon better, such as giving Hallowed Ground a slowing effect, which would add synergy to both Reckoning and Smite. So imagine you place down a Hallowed Ground, right? And then you use Reckoning. So, I mean, I should explain that better. So you place down a Hallowed Ground, and then, you know, enemies stepping on the hallowed ground would take damage as normal, but then it would also be slowed down. And so when you use Reckoning, you know, it slams them down as normal, but then they also take longer to get up. And the same thing applies to Smite, and you can combo this with like many other weapons and abilities, because it's just slow. You know, it would bring a lot of depth, and it would synergize well with what he actually has. And so that's one example. So it's not like I didn't want Oberon to be buffed at all or whatever. But yeah, I think they both overdid it and did it in a bad way. Like, if not overdone, I would say badly done, for sure. So, like, instead of a slowing effect, we got armor removal with Reckoning. And so the thing with that is that that all it really is just an add effect to Reckoning that just requires you to use held ground. And so there's no depth to it. And then uh, at the time, it was also uh, pretty unarguably like the best armor removal in the game. Like, no matter how you look at it, like, just it was definitely like the best for like any enemy it could apply to. And so yeah, so he got, super significant buff that just wasn't very interesting at all. Uh, so yeah, he also got a lot more buggy. Like, I haven't checked this bug recently, but this one has definitely lasted for like over a year. So it might be fixed by now, but the fact that it lasted so long, it was really upsetting. And if it still is around, then that's still upsetting. But it's when ancient, corrupted ancients ignore his radiation, so they'll still like buff the they'll still buff their allies and stuff despite being irradiated, which would also make those allies immune to knockdowns, which cancels out his CC. And so if you ever actually wondered why my regular Oberon usage is still much higher than my Oberon Prime usage, it's basically that. I just played a lot less when the rework happened, and like I still enjoy the game enough to keep playing. So like, there's not really a need for a change. But it's like, um, it's hard to say that like he's still like really that he's not really satisfying anymore. I guess like I don't know exactly how to describe it because like obviously I still use him a bunch. I still enjoy using him, but it's like using him isn't like it isn't like a really isn't the exciting part of the gameplay, I guess. It used to be that that using him was the good thing that was going on, but now it's like using him is just a part of the good thing that's going on. So yeah, depending on what I do, I can make using him interesting. Like, as long as I'm playing, you can be sure that I still think that, that things are interesting. Especially like even now I'm playing more like, I'm enjoying Cougar Survival and stuff again. So like, things aren't like bad by any means, but it's a whole lot lesser than it used to be. As a side note, I am like really liking Wisp. Like, Wisp has had like a whole lot of interest to like gameplay. Like, everything about Wisp is great besides something with Breach Surge, but like like seriously, like everything about her uh is great in my opinion. You'll probably see me make a video on her. Well, actually, you'll probably see some video of her in this, but I also make a video about her. Uh, so yeah. I guess the bottom line is that like I thought Oberon was a good frame for anyone who like would do like public lobbies and had a decent amount of skill. And like, now that he is like the way he is, uh he still has like those selling points and stuff, but like uh I guess like it takes like the skill factor out of it, or like rather maybe it takes the skill requirement out of it, I guess, because don't think that he can be very like skillfully used, but you know, just like basically a ton of frames now, he doesn't like really require skill. I think Wisp like somewhat requires skill. Like every frame like has like some points of like no skill, but like I think uh I think you know frames like Oberon are like at the point where like you know they don't really need skill for anything. Whereas a frame like Wisp, she could like uh he could like do a sortie well if she's with a skillful player or whatever, but you know not so much without a skillful player. I have to make a video about that eventually, which I actually do plan to do. I think I actually mentioned that in my previous video because like it's so hard to summarize that stuff, and like there's just a whole lot I have to say about it. Uh, so yeah, he was you know a really nice choice for me back then, but now he's just the frame that I'm really good with, and that's basically that. I actually said the way that I think of Wisp now is very similar to how I thought of Oberon then. So like the big difference is that Oberon isn't really disliked, so I don't think I'd be like treated any bizarre way for uh, liking Wisp a lot, but uh, who knows what'll happen. Like maybe like once the hype dies down, people will like see Wisp differently or whatever. That would be kind of interesting. It's honestly actually a little surprising that people like Wisp as much as they seem to. But yeah, I'll talk about that in a different video. But because like Wisp like is really well suited for someone who's skillful. While she does have plenty of things for someone who isn't very skillful, it seems like she has more for someone who has like a good accuracy and mobility. So yeah, it's honestly really surprising. Uh, but yeah, like my playstyle now is different from my playstyle then. So like back then, Oberon like really suited my playstyle of just like you know I wanted to do things skillfully, but like I wasn't super active in Conclave back then and stuff like that. So like I didn't have a lot of the same skills that I do now. Uh, like I don't think I could like for example shoot in the air very well, and you know like uh, Oberon is well he was like mostly well suited to just like fighting on the ground because like that was like a big complaint about Oberon, where like you know you had to use or like held ground like pretty much required you to like be on the ground to use it and stuff. Well, to like be making use of it. So like anyone who's like jumping around and stuff wouldn't really have any benefit from it. And so now that like my playstyle is basically the opposite, I use Oberon in a completely different way. And now that we have Wisp, like Wisp is like basically like my playstyle exactly. So yeah, now that I'm at the end of the video, I do have a sort of question, basically. So in a lot of YouTubers' videos, like I'll hear them like at the start of the video, they'll be like, "I'm sick," so you might hear it in my voice and stuff. And like I could never hear it in their voice, basically. Like Uh, I don't know if I'm really bad at telling that people are sick, or if it's just not like if it's just not obvious. At least not like obvious on video, but yeah. What I basically want to know is if you were able to actually tell that I was sick through this video, because I am sick, which is actually part of the reason why I'm actually making this now. Like, so like the reasons that I mentioned before. Uh, so yeah, like between like being sick uh, and like you know, if I might get better by tomorrow. I I am feeling a lot better, but like it's like definitely no guarantee that I'll quite be there. Like I got sick on like like I started really feeling it on Monday night, and it's a lot better now, especially now that I've had medicine. But yeah, it's really hard to know. So that's why I'm like just why I really just plan to just do this now, so that like you know I when I know that I'll have time, because like I'm sort of busy today too and stuff. So uh, it's more likely than not that I wouldn't have time to make this video tomorrow. So that is why I'm doing it now. But yeah, the question basically is like, can you like really tell, just like from my voice or whatever, or like was it only like made apparent when I mentioned it? Uh, so yeah, that's um, reason why uh, I decided to redo like the audio and stuff, because like it would actually have gotten really confusing the way I would have done it, because like there was some things I wanted to add on to the audio that I made on the 11th, and so then I'd have to like mention different like record dates on top of like the ones that I'd have to reference different dates on top of the ones that I already was referencing on the previous recording. And so like I was like, you know, I'm recording this on the 11th and then this happened on the 10th. And so like it's going to be a whole lot more clear uh, if I just redid that part of the video. But then I realized that that was basically redoing the whole video, and so I'm redoing the whole video. Uh, so yeah, that's it really. I think I said everything I needed to say, and so that's all for now. I'll talk to you all later. Oh yeah, I should probably mention that it's my 21st birthday. Like, I know I mentioned that like it's my birthday, but I don't think I ever actually mentioned that like how old I was turning. Yeah, so like just in case anyone was curious, yeah, I'll be 21.